Hi guys! It has gone by so fast and I still haven't made a birth story video for you. So I decided it was about time that I sit down and tell you her birth story. So let's rewind back to June the 10th of 2014. So I had been having contractions off and on for a couple of days, like over that weekend, and then I really wanted to have her on June the 9th, and I had none that day. I did have my OB appointment, and that was the first time he attempted to strip my membranes. He wasn't able to really do it a whole lot because he said that my cervix was still really posterior. It was really hard for him to reach, but he did a little bit, and I was at 3 centimeters at the time. So I was a little crampy that evening because of that, but nothing came of it, and I was kind of sad because that was the anniversary of when Justin and I started dating, so I thought it would be really cool to have her on that day, but it wasn't working out. Well, fast forward to the next day, June the 10th, and I was having like intermittent contractions just really randomly at the beginning of the day, and so I decided to go on a walk with Kaladin over to the park, and I just walked laps around the playground while he played. And it seemed to like pick up with contractions a little bit, but nothing really major. They were still really inconsistent and sporadic. So that evening though, around dinner time, is when they started getting regular, and they started out about 7 or 8 minutes apart or so, not real strong, and they just consistently got closer and closer together and lasting longer. So by the time it was about close to midnight, and they were about 3 to 4 minutes apart and lasting about 1 minute to 1.5 minutes. I laid down, I listened to a Hypnobabies track, I just tried to kind of relax and see what was happening. I didn't get to the point where I really felt like I really need to go to the hospital. It was something that I was really worried about throughout my whole pregnancy, is how am I going to know when to go in? You know, with Kaladin I was induced, so I didn't really have that experience of going into labor and knowing when to go in, and my doctor had told me when they were 4 minutes apart for lasting 1 minute long for at least an hour. So at that point I qualified for that, so I felt like maybe I should go in because I was worried about waiting too long, since it was a 30-minute drive and I had to get my doula there, who was also about 30 to 45 minutes away, and my birth photographer was about an hour away, and then of course my OB, you know, he would have to come in too. So I was just worried about being able to assemble everyone and having enough time to do all that. So I think that was my first mistake, is I was too preoccupied with that. I went in too soon. But anyway, so by about 2 in the morning, they weren't slowing down at all. So I told my doula, okay, we're going, and she said, okay, I'll meet you there. So we woke up Kaladin, because my friend Natalie, she was probably sleeping or something, couldn't get a hold of her. So we decided to take him with us then, because we didn't want to like go to her door and like bother her in the middle of the night. Well, we packed up the car first, and then we woke up Kaladin and drove to the hospital. And I listened to the birthing day track for Hypnobabies on the way there. And so we got there and we got into triage. I want to say it was about 2:30, 2:45 in the morning, and I was still 3 centimeters. They put me on the monitor and they were watching, and they were still, you know, 3 to 4 minutes apart, at least 1 minute long. So they called and they got in touch with Dr. LaRose, which is the other OB, and he told them, hey, Dr. Andrews is going to be on call starting at 6 a.m. So call back after then, and I'm pretty sure he'll want to admit her. So I hung out in triage for a really long time, basically. And they just, you know, they never slowed down, but they also didn't really get close together or stronger or anything either, and they weren't super painful. I mean, I had to kind of concentrate during them, but nothing real major, like no needing to vocalize or anything like that. Throughout that whole time, I still did not dilate any further, but once they got in touch with Dr. Andrews about 7 a.m., he said he did want to admit me, and I just had to wait for the nurses to do their shift change before someone came to take me to my labor and delivery room. I think I got settled by about 8 a.m. and around 8:30 Dr. Andrews came in and he said he wanted to break my water to see if that would help kind of pick things up. My labor had started over 12 hours prior, and I had been laboring at the hospital already for like almost 6 hours, so yeah. So I consented to that. Looking back, again, that's another thing that I think maybe I should have made a different decision on. But at the time, you know, he's definitely not pressuring me. I was definitely okay with it. He's the kind of doctor that if I would have said no, I'd rather not, he would have been like, fine. So he broke my water. And I just gotta say, I really hate the sensation of that. It's so gross. Every time, I just hate it. And I hate when you just randomly leak out. It feels like you're peeing yourself and you can't stop it, and it's just really weird, and I hate it. He broke my water and left to go to the office and, you know, do his appointments. And, you know, just every couple hours, they'd come and check, and again, if I didn't want them to, they would have respected that, I'm sure. But I'm that kind of person, and again, maybe this is maybe a bad idea, and maybe this contributed to it taking so long. But I'm such a curious person. Like, I need to know where I'm at. I want to know. I'm curious to know where I'm at. And, you know, after a couple hours there with having my water broken, it started to feel like transition. They were about 3 minutes apart. They were about a minute to a minute and a half long, and they were pretty strong, and it felt like I was in transition. In fact, about 11:30 in the morning, somewhere around there, is when my birth photographer got there, and she walked in, and the first thing out of her mouth was, "Are we in transition?" And the doula was like, "I think so." So yeah. I don't know, like my contractions felt like transition and seemed like transition, but wasn't transition. So I was trying everything. I was standing, you know, we would have to, it was this whole big ordeal since my water was broken, that we'd have to put towels down and all this stuff because I would randomly keep leaking amniotic fluid. But I was standing and rocking. I was sitting like over the side of the bed. I was taking frequent trips to the bathroom. I was moving around. I was trying all different positions. And I just kept staying at 3 centimeters. And every single time it was getting more and more frustrating and more discouraging. And I was like, well, what is going on here? So at one point, one of my friends, she has had 2 VBACs at both at home births. And her first VBAC was really long. And she told me, you know, something that worked for her was she laid on her side and kind of like put one leg like propped up and kind of stay like that, and that really helped her start to dilate. So she's like, forewarning you though, it's gonna hurt, but it'll work. So my doula had my leg up in the stirrup to kind of give me that positioning, and yes, the contractions were very uncomfortable in that position. I did not like it at all, but I did it for about 4 or 5 contractions on each side, and guys, it still didn't help. I still was stuck at 3 centimeters, and I was starting to get really hungry. Justin left and took Kaladin to lunch at Chick-fil-A. He came back with a peach shake, and I had some of it. Because you guys know, you can't starve a laboring woman. Like, at that point, I hadn't eaten in, God, over 12 hours. That's just crazy. So we just kept trying different things. Now, one thing with this labor, just like my first one, something that did really help is the acupressure. You take your hand and you put a lot of pressure right there as the contraction happens, and for some reason it works. It just takes the edge off and just makes it easier to deal with it. So I mean, I was uncomfortable, but I was still not like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna die, like, make this over now. But as the day went on, and the more hungry I got, and the more tired I got, and the more discouraged I got, it just was getting pretty bad. Now, by about 3:30, I was starting to stall a little. They were starting to spread out a little bit more, so then they were getting to 4 minutes, and then 5, and then some of them were even 6 minutes apart, and they're like, okay, what's going on here? And the nurse, she came in and said, okay, we need to know how strong your contractions are. We need to see if they're strong enough to even be doing anything. Dr. Andrews did agree to seeing if walking the halls would help. Since she was at -1 station, she was engaged enough where they didn't feel like there was the risk of cord prolapse with my water being broken. So he agreed, you know, yes, take her off the monitors, let her walk around the halls for 30 minutes and come back and we'll see where we're at. So I went around and I just walked laps for 30 minutes. So as I was walking the halls, they definitely picked up. In that 30 minutes, I want to say I had probably at least 8 contractions. They were more like 3 to 4 again. And I would have to stop during them, so they were relatively strong, but they didn't feel super strong. So I was kind of skeptical that they were going to be deemed strong enough, but, you know, it was worth a try. So we got back into the room, and still 3 centimeters. When she called him and he told her, I'm willing to wait and try as long as she's willing to wait and try. And when she relayed the message to me, she like sounded really surprised, like that was weird to her. But yes, bless Dr. Andrews and his patients. Seriously, I really think I would not have been able to do it if it wasn't him. So what he wanted to do next was put in an internal pressure catheter, and I was really not wanting to do that. I was hoping to avoid that. I had that with Caladan, and it was pretty uncomfortable with Caladan. The main issue is that you can't really get out of bed and like stand and walk and stuff anymore, because you have the risk of it falling out, and because it's not like attached, it's just kind of there. So I was not that thrilled about it, but then I also knew that it does give some helpful information, and knowing how strong my contractions were, you know, it's better than just assuming they're not strong enough and starting Pitocin. And you know, and with VBACs, even though the risk of a uterine rupture is very extremely low, it's around 1%, give or take a little bit, depending on, you know, how long it had been since your C-section, and if there's Pitocin use or not, and things like that. So for someone who has just one prior cesarean with a low transverse, at least 18 months birth to birth, and no Pitocin use or any kind of induction or augmentation or anything, and you just leave her alone, it's about one half of 1%. And then if you are using Pitocin, it's about 1 to 1.5, depending on some other factors. So it's a very, very low risk. But an internal pressure catheter is one way to monitor that situation, because that's one of the signs that a uterus has ruptured, is the contractions will read really weird on that, and that's something that they can pick up on, as well as sometimes the baby's heart rate will kind of go wonky as well. And so that's why they like to do the continuous fetal monitoring with VBAC patients. Anyways, so I wasn't happy about it, but it wasn't like a hill to die on for me, so I agreed to doing it. This nurse, I don't know what she did, but it was so different than it was with Cal. I really don't recall it being painful when the nurse with Cal inserted it, but this time it hurt so bad. The whole time she was putting it in, it felt horrible. It felt like, I can't even describe it. It was just very, very painful during and even after. Like it's like my uterus rebelled, because from when she put it in for like a good 15-20 minutes, I just had back-to-back contractions, and even when I wasn't contracting, it just hurt, and it started freaking me out. That because, you know, usually they say if you have pain in between contractions, it's a bad sign for like a possible rupture. So I was like, oh my gosh, it's kind of freaking me out that this pain's not going away. But then finally, after about 15 or 20 minutes or so, it stopped hurting all the time, and my contractions went back to being about what they were right before that. But they did measure it for about half an hour, and they were almost strong enough. They were around 60, and he wanted to see them around 70. So he came in and he explained to me he wanted to do some Pitocins. We wanted to, you know, get some progress. We didn't want to just be contracting and not even getting anywhere and just tiring out my uterus and everything. So we started off on the very, very tiniest of doses possible. I want to say it was like 2 drops per, I'm trying to remember what it was. 2 drops per minute, 2 drops per hour, it was 2. I remember it was 2, but it's like the very tiniest. Most of the time they don't even go to that tiny of a dose, they just skip over it. We started on that, and it was starting to get them a little bit stronger. Of course, that meant that it hurt a little bit more. So throughout all this, I was trying to do Hypnobabies tracks, and I just couldn't get in that groove. I just couldn't get focused enough for it to like work. I mean, it helped a little. I mean, it definitely kept me calm, which was nice, but I definitely did not get to that place where it wasn't pain, which was really disappointing. So I don't know if it just doesn't work for me, or if just certain circumstances meant it didn't work for me. Like, I don't know if I would have stayed home longer, if that would have helped. I don't know if I would have just not gotten the ruptured membranes, if that would have helped. I don't know if if it was because I didn't practice it enough, like maybe I should have started earlier, maybe I should have done more of the practice. I don't know what exactly went wrong, but I mean, it helped. I would still recommend it to people, but it did not get me in that place where you see some people say that it didn't hurt at all, or it was so easy for them to be able to do the natural birth without pain medication. But after, I don't know how long it was, 30 minutes, an hour, he decided to up it to 4, and then he told the nurse, like, that was working well. We saw that at the 4 dose, it was working well. It got to the contractions to the strength that he wanted them at, so he told the nurse, do not increase it anymore, we're good here. It wasn't too much long, I want to say around 5:30, where I just was in a lot of pain, and I was just starting to lose it. Around that time, Natalie was on her way home, and she messaged me and said, hey, if you still want me to babysit Kaladin, you know, bring him over, I will be home a little bit. So at that point, Justin left with Cal to go take him to Natalie. Thank the Lord, because it was the perfect timing, because it was right after that things just really hit the fan, and I just was starting to lose it, and I was literally screaming and cussing and thrashing around. Like, I remember at one point I was like this, and my doula had my hands, and she was like trying to like get me to like focus, and I mean, at this point, you guys, I've been in labor for 24 hours and a week for, gosh, 30 something, and I was starting to just lose it. My doula was great, and if it weren't for her, I would have wanted the epidural when my uterus was freaking out after the catheter was put in at like 4:30. She helped me get through 3 hours of just craziness that I know I wouldn't have been able to do without her. Especially, you know, Justin, he's a sweet guy. He's a wonderful husband. He's a wonderful father. But to an outsider, if they don't know him and they don't know us and they don't know our dynamic, they might see how he is during birth and think that he is too like uninvolved and doesn't care. But it's really, he has a hard time seeing me in pain. It really upsets him. And also, he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know how to help. Every time he's ever tried, he doesn't do it right, or he's afraid he's not doing it right. If I didn't have her there and it was just Justin, I'm sure he would be panicking and having a hard time because he wouldn't know how to help me. I want to say it was 7:30. It was right at shift change. The nurse came in with the new nurse, and she's like, you know, this is Jenny. She's going to take care of you now. And I was like losing my mind. So it was funny. So poor Jenny, her introduction to me was me just, being just hysterical. I was ugly crying, you guys. It was awful. I felt myself literally fighting against the contractions. I felt I was not relaxing at all in between them anymore, because up until that point I could at least relax in between, and at least you get that break in between, and you can kind of regroup and just take it one contraction at a time. But by that point, I just wasn't relaxing at all. I was tired, I was hungry, I was just over it, and yes, I was still 3 centimeters. So I've been on Pitocin for almost 4 hours and still 3 centimeters. And just in my mind, I was like, I don't know how much more of this I can take. I don't know how much longer this is gonna take. For all I knew, it would be another full 24 hours if I kept on. And then I knew, you know, if I'm fighting against my contractions and not relaxing even in between them, could I even dilate? Probably not. If I'm not relaxed, it's completely counterproductive. And so I was afraid that if I kept on with that I was not going to get my VBAC. And out of everything, out of all the preferences that I had, that was the number one, well, okay, maybe number 2, because number 1 was that I wanted immediate skin to skin, whether in the OR or the delivery room. And so number 2, I wanted a VBAC. Anything else would be nice to have, but if I got nothing else, it wouldn't make such a huge difference to me. So I wanted to do anything that could make that happen. And yeah, I was ugly crying and I was just done. So finally I'm just like, I can't do this. I need, and the nurses, bless their hearts, they were so respectful of the birth preferences that I had. So they were like, you need to say the words. Like, they didn't want to they were not suggestive of an epidural at all. They never said the word. They never asked me if I wanted one. They never said I should get one. Like, it was out of their minds. But she was like, okay, she wanted to be sure that that's what I wanted. And I'm like, I need an epidural. I want an epidural, please. I need an epidural. I was like practically begging. So she's like, okay. And she walked out. Swear to God, he was in the room within 5 minutes. Like, it was amazing. I was so glad that he wasn't busy already, because I was already done at that point. If I had to wait, that would have been awful. So he came in and he was like, all right, I'm going to take care of you. He was so nice and he was so wonderful. So Jenny and the anesthesiologist, they were like getting things set up. I was asking about the, genital cesarean, because at this point, since I had not dilated in all this time, I was starting to worry that a cesarean was going to actually be a real possibility. I trusted my doctor and I knew that he wouldn't suggest that unless it was necessary. But especially with having my water broken, I knew that I couldn't just keep doing it forever. Like, eventually I needed to either dilate or a C-section was going to happen. It looked more and more likely as the time went on. I had asked him about it in an appointment and he said it was fine with him as long as it was fine with anesthesia. So I had him there and I'm like, hey, here's this thing I want to do if I need it. What do you think? And he was like, yeah, sounds fine with me. He's like, I hope it doesn't get to that and you don't need it. But, if you do, yes, that's fine with me. That sounds great. So that was a huge relief. I cannot even tell you. Because that was, like I said, that was the most important thing to me. After that, I just knew, even if just that one aspect was different between the birth of my son and the birth of my daughter, that would mean the world. Because honestly, out of everything that happened with my son's birth, all the scary moments and all the trauma, the fact that he went into this prolonged distress where we almost lost him, the fact that I felt them start cutting and then was put on ketamine, which is like crazy, and I was hallucinating and missed him being born, and all of that stuff that happened. The main thing that is the biggest trauma to me that I will never get over is I did not get my son until he was 9 hours old. I can't get that back. Those first few hours of his life, there's just no way. Even if it was 30 minutes, I would have accepted that. I wanted her right away. I didn't want to have to wait hours and hours again. So that one aspect being different, I knew it just meant the world to me, and I was so happy that they were all supportive of that. So I think that was one part that just made a big difference going forward in this labor, that I had that relief and that off my chest. Now, he did the epidural, and this guy was good, so he actually knew what he was doing. My first epidural was botched and the guy did it wrong, and going in it was very painful, and it has caused me back issues to this day, over 3 years later. But the second one was great. It didn't hurt going in at all. It was awesome, and he dusted up and it was working wonderfully right away. He only needed to re-up it a little bit more because I was still feeling the contractions just a little bit on, like, towards my right hip. And Dr. Andrews came back, and it was definitely no more than 30 minutes, but probably more like 10 or 15 minutes, honestly. Just in that short time, he checked me, and I was a 4, and she had dropped down to 0 station. So it was already making a difference, and I was like, hallelujah, I'm finally getting some progress. Oh my gosh, it was such a relief. Justin finally got back, and so then we're like, okay, well, this could still be like so many hours. So my birth photographer was like, I have to go home. There's some medicine I have to take. I don't have it with me. And my doula, she was a nursing mom. Her baby was, how old? She was like 8 or 9 months old, so Kerrigan's age now. But, she needed to take her milk home before it went bad because she had pumped a couple of times that day. And, she had been there for, God, almost 24 hours. It was crazy. So, yeah, I'm like, you guys go. I'm going to take a nap now, so there's no point in you being here because I'm going to be sleeping. And, this epidural is really good, so, it's fine. So they left, and Justin was also tired, so we went to sleep. 2 hours later, They came in to kind of move me a little bit to make sure the epidural distributes evenly and everything, and check, and I was 7 to 8 centimeters. So I was like, yes, this is amazing. And then I called my birth photographer. She told me to give her a call once I was around 7 to 8 centimeters again, so that she'd have time to make it back, because she had to drive an hour again. So I felt so bad. I'm like, gosh, you've only been home for probably like 2 hours and you have to turn around and come back. So she's like, I'm on my way. So she left. I texted my doula and she was like, okay, keep me posted. She didn't have as far of a drive. And I was starting to feel a little bit of pain because the contractions were getting stronger and closer together. So then they had him come back and he dosed me up a little bit more, and he's like, I hope I don't have to see you again. He's like, you're great. Don't take this the wrong way, but he's like, I'm rooting for you. I hope I don't have to see you again, because, you know, that would most likely mean a cesarean. He's like, so yes, I hope this is it. I'm like, thank you. So he left and I went back to sleep. And fast forward about another 2 hours and Jenny checked me again and she's like, you are 9 to 10. So the other nurse took my temperature. So Jenny asked what it was so she could write it down, and she said, I think it was like 100 point something. And she's like, are you kidding me? And she's like, no. And I'm thinking, oh no, game over. Like, I have a fever, that's it. And nope. We just kept keeping on. So she's like, you're 9 to 10. So she sat me up so that I could labor her down. And again, I was starting to feel a little bit of breakthrough from the epidural, but this time I just wanted to just leave it be, because I know it's better to have a little bit of the sensation for pushing, and that was obviously coming soon. And it wasn't anything too bad. I would have to stop and breathe through them. And doing that was enough to just, you know, it was fine. They were definitely very bearable, so that was fine with me. That's all I wanted, is I just couldn't take the excruciatingness that was happening to me earlier. I texted my doula again. I'm like, okay, I'm at 9 to 10 centimeters, and she's like, yay. So I'm like, okay, are you coming? And she's like, yeah. So I was sitting up, and right about then is when my birth photographer walked in. So she was like, yay, you're like almost there. So we were just talking about all kinds of random stuff, and then when I'd have a contraction, I just have to stop and breathe, and it was just working out great. And this whole time, Justin's sleeping. And it was just so interesting because I could feel like suddenly the contractions felt different. I could literally feel them pushing her downward. I could feel her body being pushed down. It was like the coolest thing. And I had never felt that before, because when Cal went into distress, I only had gotten to an 8. So I had never been that far before. And I cannot even explain to you the feeling of knowing, like, oh my gosh, I'm in new territory. Like, I've gotten further than I've ever gotten, and I'm so close. And it was just, even that felt like a victory. I was sitting up for probably an hour. I think she wanted to make sure I really, really labored her down and was ready to push. And so Jenny came in and she's like, all right, let's do a couple practice pushes. And remember, she like felt inside, and I pushed, and she's like, oh, you're a good pusher. Okay, let's call the doctor. So she left again for a couple minutes, and then they started getting everything all set up. And then she put me into the stirrups, and we started again. And that's when, like, literally as they were putting me in the stirrups is when my doula walked in. So I'm like, perfect timing, yes. So we started with the pushes again, and then I started to feel really, really nauseated, and I had to throw up. And my doula, Rebekah, grabbed a thing for me to throw up into. So I was like, so I was glad there was much less vomiting this time, because I vomited so many times when I was having Cal. I was just out once in the middle of pushing. But yeah, so I was pushing, and for the longest time I thought that what I was feeling was Jenny's hand, and then she got up to like walk to do something, and I was like, oh, that's the baby's head. Like, so I was like, wow, like she's right there. So we're pushing and pushing, and then right when she was about to crown, like she was right there, is when Dr. Andrews walked in, and he comes in the door and he sees it, and he was like literally. So we're like, yes. So they get him all suited up, and we're like, all right, let's do this. So I pushed probably 3 more sets, I think, once he was there. Like at one point it felt like almost like a rubber band snap. Like I thought her head had come out, and it wasn't. And when I heard Jenny go, we need a baby nurse in here, like I knew it was really soon, it was about to happen. So then her head was out, and I was like focusing so much and my doula was like freaking out, like, yeah. So I didn't hear them the first time, and they're like, stop pushing, stop pushing, stop pushing. So I was like, oh crap, okay, sorry. He kind of suctioned her a little and let her do her rotation before we did another push, and then she was out. And he, again, just a little bit more suctioning, just looking at her, she's good, okay, and they're handing her to me, and it was the most magical moment to have your baby right there, like they're fresh and brand new. She wasn't even really crying, like she just was staring up at me, and I was just staring down at her. I just couldn't take my eyes off of her. There's all these pictures of me just looking at her, because it was incredible. I just can't even describe it, you guys. It was so amazing, and just this intense, just like relief. I did it, and she was here, and I did it, and the difference in the experience was just huge. So he's like, oh yeah, you want to do delayed clamping, right? I said yes. As soon as they handed her to me, she pooped on me immediately. That was funny. And then a couple minutes later, she peed on me. Then she pooped on me some more. At one point, they checked, and they're like, oh, cord's still pulsing. I was like, still? Okay. So we just kept waiting. And then after, it was at least 10 minutes, and then it finally had stopped pulsating. So then they had Justin cut the cord. And then he was like, well, let's see if your placenta is ready. And he kind of just like pushed on my abdomen a little bit, and he's like, oh, yep. He's like, okay, just one little push. And it was so easy, like I didn't even really feel it come out. He did like he put his hand, just kind of sweep around, make sure that none of the placenta was retained. And I'm sure also just to make sure that my uterus in fact did not rupture. I didn't have any troubles bleeding as far as I know. So I only pushed for 30 minutes, just about 30 minutes. So they told me that was really fast. You know, I had a child before, and I had been in labor before, but I had never pushed before. So it's basically like being a first-time mom. So for her to come out that fast, being a first-time mom, and especially with having that epidural that was still really pretty strong, that's really fast for that. So she still had some like fluid. So they gave us the bulb syringe, and they're like, anytime you see, you know, like bubbles at her mouth, like suction it out, because she didn't spend a lot of time in birth canal for it to get squeezed out. So they're like, okay, you guys are good, you know. Jenny's like, just call me back in when you're ready for me to like weigh her and all that stuff. So, you know, however you want. So they left us, and that's when you finally see the video footage that I have, because they told me that we were not allowed to take any video until my legs were out of the stirrups, and my legs were in the stirrups that whole time. So I'm really sad that we didn't get to get some that was more immediately after her birth, but at least I have the photos. And if you want to see all of the photos, there's a link right here. You can click on it to go to my birth announcement video, which has all of the photos in it in a slideshow. So I hung out for like, it was at least an hour that I just held her, and she was just amazing. I tried to nurse her, and she just wasn't really interested. She latched on, and she like suckled for like a minute, and then she was like, nope. When we tried the other side, same thing. She just wasn't interested. So I just looked at her, and then we decided to name her Kerrigan, which is the name that Justin wanted, and he had actually chosen that name, gosh, over a decade ago, and I just was unsure on, I didn't want to commit to a name without meeting my child, and then I was like, okay, yeah, you can come in. So then she measured her. She was 8 pounds and 12 ounces, so she actually was more than that before she pooped. And she was 21 3/4 inches long, and you know, she did all that. She did, you know, did the footprints and all that stuff, got her diaper on her. So the birth check was all done, and she left, and then I had the doula hold her for a little bit, and then she gave her to Justin, and it was just the sweetest thing, seeing him hold his baby girl for the first time. And she was just asleep and just content as can be. So after a little bit, we put her in the bassinet, and she just kept sleeping. So then finally we went back to sleep, and I got a few hours of sleep. Well, it turns out I didn't have any tearing. I had just a little bit of a skid mark, and so it was only a little bit sore if I sat on it just so. And I definitely attribute that to my doctor. He was stretching and massaging everything to like give me a lot of support on my perineum and make sure that I didn't tear. Like the difference in recovery was insane. I felt great. I had the numbness went away really fast too, because with Caladan it took hours and hours and hours and hours and hours to be able to walk again. It was crazy. Like 12 hours before I could walk again. She was born at 2:43 a.m. This time, you know, by the time that I had woken up a few hours later, like about 7 a.m., by that time, all that was left was this little patch of this big right above my left knee that was still numb. Everything else was normal. So I got up to, the nurse went with me to the bathroom, make sure I didn't like faint or something crazy. And then I was like, wow, I feel really good. By the next day, I felt really good, and less than a week and I felt like myself. Well, besides some really crappy bladder control. That took about a week to get a little bit better under control. But yes, the difference is night and day between the two recoveries. It is crazy. I felt so good because it just was so awful after my C-section. So yes, I did it. I got my VBAC. It was amazing. I didn't get exactly the experience I wanted, but it was still such a wonderful experience. And I just cannot thank my birth team enough. Every one of them was amazing. Dr. Andrews was so amazing. He was so supportive. He was just perfect, exactly what I needed. He was competent, he was confident, he was experienced, but yet he was also laid back and hands-off. Just wonderful. He treats it like a partnership, like it should be, and it was so bittersweet going to my 6-week appointment. I was kind of sad that I was leaving his care because he was great. I will recommend him to anyone who will listen. If you live anywhere near the Pensacola area and you want an OB that is more naturally minded, he's basically like a midwife, really. He's just wonderful. My birth photographer, Shelly Ray, she is amazing. She took amazing photos. She took amazing newborn photos also. She was such a friendly, wonderful person. I was so great spending all the time with her. She is incredibly talented and super, super reasonably priced. She should really charge way more than she does for her talent level. Cannot recommend her enough. Rebekah, my doula, she was so sweet. She was there for me. I can never repay her. The gratitude just, she was amazing. So Littlest doula, Rebekah Kelly, she's your girl. And just all the staff, really, all the nurses, the one in the middle who did the internal cath, but she was still a good nurse. I definitely felt well taken care of by all of them. I definitely felt so much support. And also the postpartum, we were there for 2 days afterwards because when Kerrigan was born, she had a fever also, and when they did the first blood panel, she had elevated white blood cell count, so they started her on an IV and gave her antibiotics just to be on the safe side in case she did in fact have an infection. And so she was doing well, so she was able to room in with me. They didn't take her away for more than 1 hour out of any 24-hour period, so it was just the difference was she had this little IV in her hand. It was a little sad. But she did well on the meds, and it came back that she did not have an infection, so they took it out and we were good to go home. She was born 2:43 a.m. on Thursday. We went home on Sunday at like 1 p.m. So that was my VBAC story. It was so wonderful and so worth it. I definitely encourage any of you moms who are interested in attempting a VBAC to definitely give it a try. I got a lot of support from Facebook groups about VBAC. So if you search VBAC, there's a few support groups there. They're wonderful. I also got a lot of information, evidence-based information using studies and peer-reviewed studies and real statistics called VBACfacts.com. I have that down in the description below. She has amazing information that was so helpful and so comforting for me to see in black and white. There's so many doctors and so many people that just have the perception that a VBAC is dangerous, and they really play up the risk of VBAC and really downplay the risk of cesarean. There are of course some times where it is not the best option for you. There's, you know, some of them that are medically involved and some of them, hey, if you're just not comfortable with the risk, that is your choice. But I do encourage all moms to really thoroughly research both the options so that they can make an informed choice about what the best choice is for them, and have it be coming from them and their choice and not one that they're bullied into from either their doctor or their partner or whoever. So anyway, all of that said, I am so glad that I made that choice. It was so worth it. You know, of course there was a little worry in the back of my mind, but I knew that chances were good that we were going to come out of it safely, and we did. If you have any questions about VBAC or Kerrigan's birth story, leave them in the comments for me down below. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye!